You ever wonder about that musical term funk, its true origin, and that it may be our soul pool signaling us? And all of us creatures forgot to listen to it. Well, we're going to explore that and so much more right here on the iPaintCreatures channel. Welcome to the beautiful Be Well forest where the story of Matsu and the funky-eyed puppets unfolds. And we are exploring the origin of funk and how it relates to the epic story experience of Matsu. So the word funk, it originated from Latin and French, and it actually comes from the word fumus, right? Something that stinks and gives off an odor. And then when it came into the English language, probably around the 18th century, it meant strong odor, bad smell, and it also referred to a strong sense of fear. And then it got translated, you know, being in a funk, a depressed or fearful mood. And I'd like to tell you the story that I learned in the bebop era. Miles and Coltrane and Bird and all those cats were in the Village in New York City, and they were exploring the jazz outlet, you know, the free form way of expressing with musical instruments the poetic realm of our vibration as our soulful creature beings. And they would, of course, had the day gigs, you know, where they got paid to pay their bills, and they had to perform in front of a bunch of white folks and basically just, you know, stay within all the confines of music so it wasn't too adventurous. But late night, they would gather in the basements and the, you know, the hideout places, the jam sessions, and they'd all go there to play, to explore the real soulful part of their music. And they started playing all kinds of riffs, and they didn't have no sheet music, weren't following any guide rails or anything. And basically they used the term funk when they noticed one of the other players was playing the same old riffs, maybe some of the riffs from, you know, the daytime gigs and the early evening gigs. And they would go up to each other and say, funk it up. So it was a way of kind of loosening, you know, the jam and getting them to explore and dive deeper in that soul pool and get those signals to, you know, explore and see where this bebop and this jazz improvisational music would go. You know, and then Black Americans, especially down in New Orleans, they took the term and started saying funky, and they meant raw, earthy, and real soulful. So, you know, the opposite of fake and polished, you know? And so it became funky. So how in my life, I learned through creating and telling the epic story experience of Matsu. A lot of my creatures, you know, I love funk music, and it's one of my favorite genres, you know, that's been defined by the American tradition of great American music. And so I started incorporating it into a lot of my creatures, you know, following in the footsteps of Sanford and Son, right? And Fat Albert, and even Barney Miller theme, you know? A lot of the funky music that became, you know, integrated into the visual. And so funk, a bunch of the creatures started saying terms like funky free, like the main raw character, funkified, right? And then there were other creatures that started talking all about funk unstuck. And so I started to define funk as kind of that sensing of that fear inside yourself. You know, the traumas of loss, right? And betrayal, and any of those outside occurrences that affected how you function creatively and expressively and have courage in yourself to live your purpose, to tune your poetic compass and project your painted poetic symphony, and don't have any hesitation in your daily life to just be who you be, funkified and free. And so I started really noticing that this was a theme, and I carried it on to kind of do cartoons and fantastical creatures that were all about living funky. Funky meaning being exactly who you be in your unique way, which is, you know, strange to other beings, but it's not strange in the, you know, eerie fashion. It's strange because you're so unique and so original and free, getting to the state where you don't really get affected by outside occurrences and appearances and opinions and identities. So you be the funky self you are. And then funkified is when you really locked into being that funkified creature and being who you be and bringing your purpose to the table, and everything you do is contributing from that real soul pull of being funkified and free. And when I was working at Lucasfilm, I got turned on to a lot of Joseph Campbell, and a lot of deep universal myths, and how he traveled the world and he saw, he learned stories from all these different cultures, and basically he would compare a story from someone way up in Alaska or in Iceland, way up somewhere on that part of the world, all the way down to the deep Congo jungles, and basically it was the same story. They were just different symbols, how they were telling it. That's why he came out with his famous book that influenced George Lucas, you know, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. They just have different face, but it's the same hero's journey. And I got introduced to the roots of all these incredible digital tools that are available now, from Adobe Premiere to Adobe After Effects to Final Cut Pro, to starting with Pro Tools now with Logic Pro X, and all these different platforms. And I got educated on the history that they all go back to the Edit Droid and the Sound Droid. And those were two technologies that Lucasfilm and George Lucas developed to do non-linear editing, so they could see the films and the cuts and the sound, and without having to cut up all the film, the expensive film, and then they didn't have to wait until all of it was, you know, developed so they could see how it flowed. And so they became non-linear digital editing tools. So it started this, to me, amazing evolution of like being able to be an artist and rearrange sound and visuals in a non-linear fashion, non-destructive fashion. And so that led me to really being interested in a lot of those tools. I wasn't really the digital type early in life. And I started to see, whoa, those are incredible, because that's how we do a lot of the traditional arts. Like, that's how I edit poetry, and that's how I even make these videos. I come from, you know, just truly talking deep within inside myself and letting it flow into what it's supposed to be, you know? Just like going back to the bebop days when they were in the jam sessions, late night in the basements and stuff. I want to funk it up. I want to, you know, explore new ways of editing and creating things. So a lot of that showed me how the arts were all converging. Like my MacBook Pro now, I can do the album cover, I can do the movie poster, I can edit the sound, I can create the music, I can edit the film, I can do the whole production. And so all the arts started to converge, and I've always been a multi-discipline artist. So it's amazing how all these tools came together. And why I'm talking about that is because that's when I started to realize that's what gets your funk unstuck.